Some great interviews on the channel with Fight Night picks. We've got Joe Solecki, Sasha Palatnikov, Kyle Dawkins, and the like. And Matt, Joe Solecki in the biggest fight of his life. He's taking on a childhood idol of his when he spent time in New Jersey, of you as well. And it's not Dan Miller. We're talking A10 Jim Miller. And Matt, for Jim Miller, I wrote it down. Overall in UFC lore, and this is regardless of weight class, what have you, Jim Miller's going to break a record that he ties with Donald Cerrone. He currently has 36 fights in the UFC. He's going for 37 this weekend. He's third for wins at 21. He's third with submission wins at 10. He's sixth with bonuses at 12. He's number one with submission attempts for 45. What hasn't Jim Miller done in the UFC? I'm going to talk about some of the fights, and these are losses in the UFC. Benson Henderson, Nate Diaz, Donald Cerrone, Beneil Dariush, Dustin Poirier, Anthony Pettis. Jim Miller's been in there with some of the best fighters of all time, let alone lightweight.
Francisco Trinaldo.
Yikes. Massaran Duba, been there and done that. 3-2 in the 5-on-in. For Joe Solecki, he just continues to win. I get it. He has 2 losses on his record, and he has been finished in the past. This is going to be an interesting one, though, because we talked about Jim O. Impa Kasanganay has left. Scott Holtzman has left. Joe Solecki's still there with your number 1 ranked Bellator welterweight, John Salter, leading the charge. And for Joe Solecki, what a grappler he is. Holy smokes. His last time out against Austin Hubbard, Hubbard hadn't been submitted really at all like that. And Joe Solecki just rode the back for a few minutes and then just sunk in that rear naked choke. For Solecki, again, the 5-on-in. Gilbert Petronicio with Ring of Combat. He beat Jacob Bond. Listen, we've seen Jacob Bond before. I've seen him on the regional scene. Beat James Wallace on Contender Series. Beat old Matt Wyman. And that's a win these two guys hold in common, is Matt Wyman. One of them beat him when it mattered, and one of them didn't. And for Joe Solecki, he beat Austin Hubbard, fellow prospect, in a very interesting fight. For Jim Miller, listen, if you have porous grappling whatsoever, if you make mistakes, we saw that in his last win when he fought Roosevelt Roberts, the up-and-coming prospect that's kind of faltered lately. But Roberts stumbles, Miller goes in and submits him. But in his last fight, it was a Miller fight in the first round, and then in the last 2, it wasn't.
So Jim Miller's a really interesting character, because I can basically tell you everything he's ever going to go for in the run of a fight. There's a lot of overhands, there's a lot of inside leg kicks, one of the early adopters of calf kicks, and then just his jiu-jitsu is absurd. My issue with Jim Miller, and I'm not even going to call him A10 Jim Miller, I'm going to call this rendition Lyme disease Jim Miller, because ever since he's got...
that's mean.
But it's true. Ever since he's got Lyme disease, there has been a difference in the cardio of Jim Miller, and that just is the truth. And I know that's something that you can't get over as time progresses. It's something that he said doesn't affect him like it once originally did, but his cardio is the one thing, and of course he's getting older too, which doesn't help, but his cardio is the one thing, like you had brought up. Early on, let's say you were an up-and-coming prospect, you were a great striker. The last guy you ever want to fight is Jim Miller, because he's going to take you down and submit you. But we're starting to see that as Jim Miller is getting a little bit older, there are a lot of miles on the gas tank. He is almost 38 years old. The gas tank's not what it once was, and what Jim Miller, this stage that he's in now, kind of reminds me of the stage that Joe Lauzon was in the last little stage of his career. I know Joe Lauzon and him are always going to be tied together because of the crazy fights that they've had, but Jim Miller at this stage can give you that one round of grappling explosion, and then it falls off. And it hurts to say, because I love Jim Miller, one of my favorite fighters of all time. I love watching Jim Miller fight. But unless Jim Miller is just really dedicated to the calf kick and some wrestling, he is going to get tired as the fight progresses. Whereas if you look at Jim Miller, anytime I'll say before UFC 200, let's say, it was, I'm just going to move forward. I'm going to march forward, lots of pressure, lots of wrestling. And if I take you down, you better watch your neck because I'm going to take it. And that's not the guy that we're seeing anymore. And it could be age, it could be injuries, it could be a whole number of things. But we're not getting that same level of Jim Miller. I think we're going to learn a lot about Joe Solecki in this fight because, of course, he's a good grappler. And it's not... there's something we talk about where it's one thing to beat a guy, but it's another thing to beat a guy at what he does well. If you out-grapple Jim Miller, you're a much better fighter than if you knock out Jim Miller, because I'm going to learn a lot more about your overall game because of it. Let's say Joe Solecki goes in here and fights Jim Miller like he was able to fight Austin Hubbard, take the back with barely any resistance, just kind of ride him, see what's the best position, and then get in a submission. Then I'm ready to say Joe Solecki's ready for those like 25 to maybe not 15 yet, but those like 25 to 18 type range of fighters in the lightweight division. But you're going to learn a lot about a win over Jim Miller. And I do say this a lot. Beating Jim Miller can be the worst thing for some guy's career because you
Like
beat
Scott Holtzman.
Like Scott Holtzman. You beat Jim Miller, and then it's never an easy fight for the rest of your UFC career because everyone still likes Jim Miller, and everyone remembers how good he was, so you're only going to be known as, wow, you're that guy who beat Jim Miller. Well, now you're ready for X fighter who's really good at lightweight. I don't want them to do that with Joe Solecki, but I don't think it's the same Jim Miller that was sort of that tester before. I think it's a diminished version, and for that reason, I do like Joe Solecki quite a bit.
Jim Miller coming out of Miller Brothers MMA. For Joe Solecki, again, Jim O, and you talk about the quality of guys there, but again, number one Bellator middleweight John Salter. What does John Salter do so well? Exactly what really both these guys do. Joe Solecki a bit like a younger Jim Miller, only he more strikes to get into position for the takedown. He likes to go for some lower leg takedown as well, which, listen, you can get caught in a guillotine from Jim Miller. I mean, there's a lot of submissions that he can go for as you're pressuring him. I mean, Jim Miller's an all-timer. You don't need me to say that anymore. Solecki open to minus 135. He's minus 236 right now. He's one of the second biggest mover on this card, a 43% clip. For Jim Miller, open to plus 115. He's now plus 189. And over on Tapology, 1,077 votes, 72% Solecki, 73% by decision. I like the younger Jim Miller in this fight, Joe Solecki. Again, I just love the game. And if you look at the overall body of work, again, you're beating guys that you should beat, and along the way, you're going to lose some of your fights. He lost to Nicholas Mata. He got knocked out by Mata. Mata's got his UFC debut coming up in a short bit, and he's taking on Damir Hadzovic in May. I had to look at it, and he lost to Cesar Balmaceda back at CFFC 65, which was in 2017. You're going to lose a fight like that, and Nicholas Mata is UFC ready. Since then, he's continued to win. Again, I've seen Jacob Bond fight before. Weird to see his name pop up. And that Zhu Enyanwu card with Chris Dawkins, great one. We're going to be talking about a Dawkins. But yeah, I really like Joe Solecki in this fight, and I think he's one of those guys, like a young up-and-comer you need to watch out for. Miller on a bit of a decline. And again, I set it up. He had a great first round against Vince Pichel. Vince Pichel's a good fighter. You didn't know exactly what you were going to get. He had that motorcycle accident. He's also 37, 38 years old. Vince Pichel out-wrestled Jim Miller and totally nullified his game in the second and third round, where Miller couldn't really do anything. And you kept thinking, well, geez, Vince Pichel probably shouldn't get himself into these positions. And he made out just fine. I think the cardio Solecki, it really plays a factor in this one. I like him in this fight.
Unless Jim Miller comes out in this fight like he did in the Clay Guida fight, crack him with an overhand and submit him quick, I just don't really see how he's going to be able to get it done. I like his grappling a lot, but again, with Solecki, it's not like you're just fighting a Roosevelt Roberts or a Scott Holtzman or levels of fighters like that who they can get submitted on their worst day. Joe Solecki, very sound grappler, offensively and defensively, and for that, I do like him in this fight.
Matt, both of us going with Joe Solecki to get the win. Really looking forward to the entire card. 15 fights. It's a headlining prelim. The overall headliner, Marvin Vettori, taking on Kevin Holland. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.